You'd never leave me, Kayla, he said, holding my credit card in one hand and his beer in the other. You don't even have enough money to fill your gas tank without me. Be serious. I laughed. Just once. Just a little. Like something in me cracked, not from humor, but release. He wasn't even angry when he said it. He looked amused. Like I was a child trying to grab the steering wheel. His smirk stretched across his face so easily, I knew this wasn't a line he'd just come up with. It was one he'd probably been rehearsing in his head for years. Waiting for the right moment to remind me of my place. And the worst part? He wasn't wrong. Not in the way he meant. His name's Drew Adams. I was 24 when we got married, 25 when I stopped checking our bank account because it stressed me out, and 31 when I realized I hadn't made a financial decision on my own in over 6 years. I used to think controlling men came with shouting. Or slamming doors. But Drew did it with budgeting apps, gaslighting smiles, and reminders to just send me the receipt every time I went anywhere. He didn't yell. He tracked. He explained. He managed. He made it sound like love. The first year of our marriage, I had a freelance graphic design business. Small, but mine. He said we should centralize everything. It would be easier if he handled the finances since he had the steady paycheck. I wanted to believe it. Drew worked in tech compliance at a medical software company. Good job, smart guy, always had charts for everything. He even made a spreadsheet comparing different health insurance plans and walked me through it like a TED Talk. Just focus on what you love, he said, kissing my forehead. I've got the numbers. What he really meant was, I've got you. It started small. I couldn't buy groceries without logging them in an app he insisted we share. He called it keeping each other accountable. He asked me to text him photos of receipts in case we ever got audited. I laughed it off at first. Who audits married couples buying yogurt? But I texted them anyway. Then came the alerts. I didn't know he'd set up push notifications on every card. I didn't know until I picked up a clearance cardigan at Target, and he texted me before I even made it to my car. $28.75 for a sweater in April? I stared at the screen, my fingers cold. I hadn't even remembered telling him I was going to Target. I stopped going places after that. I stopped painting too. My little home studio got turned into a storage space, then eventually a makeshift office for him during the pandemic. He called it temporary. The easel stayed in the garage for 2 years. When I found it last spring, it had spiderwebs on the legs. Still, I told myself this was normal. That I was just being dramatic. That maybe I wasn't good with money, and Drew was helping. That marriage was compromise, and I was just compromising a little more. Until the morning my debit card got declined at Kroger. I was standing in line with a bag of coffee, paper towels, and a rotisserie chicken. I'd done the math in my head, it shouldn't have been more than $30. But the moment I tapped the card, the terminal buzzed red. Declined. I tried again. Same thing. The cashier gave me a sympathetic smile, like I was a college kid with bad luck, and quietly set my items aside. I walked to the parking lot shaking. Not from embarrassment, but from that slow, creeping realization that I didn't have access to a single cent without permission. I came home and asked Drew what happened. He didn't even look up from his phone. Oh, he said, casually. I shut down that card. You went a little over budget last month. I blinked. What budget? The grocery one. It's fine. Just use the household card, but text me before you do, okay? I need to track it properly. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just, use the card, and ask first. I didn't say a word. Just nodded and went to the bedroom. Sat down on the edge of the bed, still wearing my jacket, and stared at the wall for a long time. Not thinking. Just listening. To the silence in my own head. That night, I cried in the shower. I let the water run too hot and cried where he couldn't hear me. I pressed my forehead against the tile until my skin turned red. And the next morning, I smiled at him over scrambled eggs. Because what else was I supposed to do? We didn't have kids. Just Barney, our golden retriever who Drew called his only dependent. I used to joke that Barney and I were both on the same leash. I don't think I realized how close to the truth I was. Things kept stacking after that. Drew got more comfortable. More smug. He started saying things in public. We were at his coworkers' barbecue a few months back. Someone asked how we managed finances. They were newlyweds, just trying to figure it out. I was about to answer when Drew cut in. She doesn't touch the money, he said, chuckling. She'd buy 6 throw pillows and a vintage coat and forget about rent. Everyone laughed. Even I laughed. What else could I do? But something in me twisted when I saw his face. It wasn't teasing. It was ownership. He liked humiliating me a little. Liked knowing I wouldn't say anything back. Liked the power. And then came the woman across the street. She moved in for a few weeks, something about a temporary project at Drew's company. I only saw her twice. Once when I walked Barney and she waved hello. The second time, the day she left. She was standing on the sidewalk with a rolling suitcase, smoking a cigarette, waiting for her Uber. She looked tired, but relieved. I made small talk, asked if she liked the neighborhood. She smiled. It's nice. Kinda sterile, though. Everyone here looks like they vote the same. I laughed. You worked with my husband, I think. Drew Adams? Her face shifted, barely. But I saw it. Oh. Drew, right. Yeah. He, talked about you. Something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten. What did he say? She hesitated. Just, that you were busy a lot. Out of town sometimes. I don't know, maybe I misunderstood. I hadn't been out of town in 2 years. Drew knew that. That night, I cooked dinner. I asked Drew casually if he ever talked about me at work. He shrugged. Sure. Why? Someone said you mentioned I was away a lot. He paused. Then smiled. People talk. Don't worry about it. Then he looked at me and said, with absolute calm. If we ever split, you know you'd have nothing. That's not an insult. It's just math. That was the moment. Right there. Not the card being declined. Not the spreadsheet budgets. Not the silent meals or the locked apps or the years of being slowly erased. That sentence. He thought I was helpless. He thought I'd stay. Not because I loved him, but because I had no other choice. And I realized something. He hadn't trapped me. He'd built a cage so obvious, he thought I'd never look for the door. But I had. A long time ago. And he didn't know I already had the key in my hand. I didn't go to the Christmas party that year, even though Drew circled the RSVP card and wrote my name in neat block letters like it was an appointment he'd already confirmed. The night of the party, I sat alone on the couch with the TV playing low, the tree still in its box in the garage. At 11:42 p.m., someone from his office posted a photo, Drew in the background, drink in hand, one arm around a woman in a green dress. His smile was the same one he used on me back when I still believed it meant something. I paused the video and just stared. He didn't even look guilty. He looked free. The thing about men like Drew is that they only see resistance. They don't know how to read silence. So when I stopped arguing, stopped asking about the bills, stopped caring if dinner was ready on time, he thought he'd finally fixed me. He told people I'd been under stress, that I was focusing on self-care, as if my withdrawal were just another one of his success stories. Everyone nodded along. He was so convincing, so smooth, that even I could almost believe it. At home, I became invisible on purpose. I learned how to move quietly, how to make the house look lived in without ever really being present. I stopped filling the air with apologies and small talk. I let him fill it instead. He bragged more now, about his new title at work, about the golf club membership he'd earned, about his next promotion that was just a matter of time. He bought himself a watch as a reward, and when I asked if we could afford that, he laughed. "You worry too much, Kayla. That's my job. Yours is to look pretty and relax." I looked pretty, all right. Pretty patient. Pretty silent. Pretty close to done. When he came home late, he always made sure to announce himself loudly, as if daring me to ask where he'd been. I didn't. I'd be folding laundry or reading on the couch. He once said, "You know, I kind of like this new version of you. Peaceful. Less anxious." I smiled at the page. So do I. A few weeks later, I saw him at the grocery store. Not because I followed him, because I'd gone out for milk, something I hadn't done in weeks. He was at the end of the aisle, laughing with that same woman from the Christmas photo. She leaned in close, said something that made him grin like a schoolboy. When he spotted me, his smile faltered for just a second. Then he turned to her and said, loud enough for me to hear, "That's my wife. She's not big on going out." The woman's eyes darted to me, uncomfortable, and she mumbled something before walking away. Drew approached with that patronizing smile that always made my stomach twist. "Hey, sweetheart. Didn't expect to see you here. You okay?" "I'm fine," I said quietly, pushing my cart past him. "Enjoy your shopping." He stood there for a moment, holding a bag of oranges, watching me walk away. For the first time, I think he wasn't sure what to do. That night, he was overly kind. He cooked dinner, poured me a glass of wine, even offered to watch one of my shows. It was his favorite kind of manipulation, affection as damage control. But I'd seen the woman in the green dress, and more importantly, I'd seen the flicker of panic in his eyes when he realized he might have been caught. I almost pitied him. Almost. I started leaving the house more after that. Nothing suspicious, just walks, errands, yoga classes. I joined a book club that met at the library once a week. He teased me for it at first, saying I'd finally found old lady friends to gossip with, but I just smiled and said, maybe they'll teach me how to budget better. That made him laugh. What he didn't know was that one of those old ladies worked part-time at a credit union and helped me set up a clean, trace-proof account under my maiden name. Every little freelance design job I did went straight there: baby shower invites, social media ads for local shops, posters for the library fundraiser. Just small, quiet deposits. The kind no one notices until they add up. He thought I was just distracting myself. He had no idea I was slowly rebuilding the freedom he stole. Drew was thriving in the spotlight of his own story. His boss loved him, his coworkers looked up to him, his neighbors saw him as the perfect husband with a slightly fragile wife. I saw it too when I bumped into one of the neighbor ladies at the coffee shop one afternoon. She smiled politely but gave me that pitying look people reserve for someone they've already decided to feel sorry for. "You look good, Kayla. I was worried about you. Drew mentioned you've been going through something." I blinked, keeping my voice steady. "Going through something?" She nodded quickly, embarrassed. "You know, he just said you were having a hard time adjusting lately. That you needed space. He's such a good man, you're lucky to have someone who cares that much." I smiled, the kind of tight smile that could cut glass. "Yeah," I said softly. I am. That night, I deleted the photo of us from the living room wall and replaced it with one of Barney. Drew didn't notice for 3 days. Spring came, and with it, his promotion. He came home one night with champagne and 2 glasses. "We did it," he said, his grin too wide, his tone almost rehearsed. "Vice President of Compliance. You're married to a big shot now." "Congratulations," I said, reaching for the glass he handed me. He raised his flute. "To us." "To you," I corrected, and clinked my glass gently against his. Then, as the bubbles fizzed up the sides, I smiled and said, "Enjoy it while it lasts." He froze for half a second. It was small, just the way his jaw tensed, the way his eyes flickered to mine. Then he laughed. "You always have to ruin a toast with your weird jokes." "Guess I do." I took a long sip and held his gaze over the rim of my glass. For the first time in years, I saw him hesitate. Not much. Just a crack. But it was enough. I started preparing in earnest after that. Not just financially, mentally. Emotionally. I began clearing the house in small ways, donating clothes, shredding old paperwork, boxing up things I didn't plan to take. I told Drew I was decluttering. He loved that word. Said it made me sound productive again. He had no idea I was decluttering him. The more confident he got, the more careless he became. He'd leave his email open on the laptop. He'd toss receipts onto the counter without checking them. He forgot that I was still watching, still learning. One evening, while folding his shirts, I noticed a folded hotel invoice in his jacket pocket, a local place, not far from town. I didn't confront him. I just placed it neatly on his dresser so he'd know I'd seen it. The next day, it was gone. So was his guilt. By then, I'd stopped feeling anger. What replaced it was colder, quieter. I remember standing in front of the mirror one morning, brushing my hair, and barely recognizing the woman staring back. She looked calm. Still. A little dangerous. I think that's when I realized I'd finally caught up to him, not in power, but in understanding. He spent years mastering control, I'd spent months mastering patience. He went on his annual summer golf trip a few weeks later. Same group of coworkers, same photo ops, same stories. Only this time, I didn't pack his bags for him. I didn't iron his shirts or slip notes into his luggage like I used to. He came into the kitchen with his suitcase and a grin. "You sure you don't want to come this time? Could use a cheerleader." I looked up from my laptop, the one he thought I only used for recipe blogs. "I'm good here." "You have fun. Don't miss me too much," he teased. "I won't," I said, still typing. "You just enjoy yourself." He chuckled, kissed the top of my head, and wheeled his suitcase out the door. I waited until I heard the car pull away, then closed the laptop and exhaled. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't even sad. Just steady, like everything inside me had locked into place. I stood in the doorway and looked around the house. It was spotless, still, almost sterile. Every wall and surface told a story Drew thought he'd written. But in the corners, under the quiet, my fingerprints were everywhere, on the bills I'd overpaid, on the account numbers I'd memorized, on the little file folder tucked neatly inside my suitcase by the door. My name. My proof. My future. I walked to the window, pulled back the curtain, and watched the sky shift to gold as the sun set behind the trees. Somewhere on the highway, Drew was probably laughing at a podcast or calling someone else's name with that same easy charm. Let him. Let him think I was still here, waiting. Let him think I'd accepted my place. Because the truth was, he was right about one thing. I wasn't going anywhere. Not yet. His assistant sent me an email by mistake. That's how it started. Just a forwarded reservation, lunch confirm, Ava and Drew, 1:15 p.m. The name meant nothing at first. It was the restaurant that stopped me cold. A tiny place tucked between a florist and a wine shop downtown, the kind of place that still folded napkins by hand. Drew had taken me there for our second anniversary, said it was just upscale enough to feel like we mattered. I remember how proud he looked when the hostess knew his name. Seeing it again now, the same restaurant, the same time slot, the same smug smile I could practically hear through the screen, it was like being slapped without warning. My first instinct was to delete it, pretend it didn't hit the way it did. But my hand hovered over the trackpad, and instead, I dragged it into the folder I'd been quietly building for nearly a year. I renamed the folder that night. It used to be called Neutral Evidence, a name chosen to avoid suspicion. But now it had a new name, Sundown. Quiet. Ominous. A signal to myself that the light was almost gone for him. After that, everything shifted into sharper focus. The email didn't show me anything I hadn't already suspected, but it gave me something real, something timestamped and traceable. And more importantly, it gave me permission to stop pretending I was imagining things. I began combing through past statements, not for shock, but for structure, hotel invoices tucked into business trips, dinner tabs marked team dinner on days his entire team was out of town, Uber rides that started at work but didn't end at home. He was sloppy, careless, arrogant. And I was patient. I still remember the first night I allowed myself to feel the betrayal in full, not just intellectually, but bodily. I was sitting at the kitchen table with Barney curled under my feet, the house lit only by one dim lamp. I opened a folder of statements from 6 months ago and spotted a string of ATM withdrawals, each under $200, spread across 4 different counties. They were far enough apart that they couldn't have been casual, but close enough that Drew thought I'd never check. That night, I cried once, not because I still loved him, but because I realized he didn't fear losing me. He didn't even consider it a possibility. He thought I was decoration now, a silent partner in a play he was directing. And because I didn't argue, didn't ask, didn't push, he assumed I was resigned. What he didn't realize was that I was watching him from the wings, documenting every dropped line, every missed cue, every secret rendezvous he'd mistake for discretion. He'd made me invisible. So I used that invisibility to take notes. Around that same time, something strange started happening. He became oddly generous, not toward me, but in how he performed affection. One night he brought home a bottle of red wine and a cheese platter I hadn't asked for. "Thought we could do a little wine night," he said, already uncorking the bottle. I played along, poured 2 glasses, and listened as he told a story about mentoring someone new at work, a woman named Rachel, young, driven, reminds me of you, but with a bit more edge. I smiled and said, "She sounds impressive." And he replied, "She's got direction." "You used to have that too." I took a sip of wine and nodded. I guess I lost it somewhere. He didn't see the flash in my eyes. But viewers would. They'd be screaming at the screen. And that's exactly what I wanted. After he went to bed that night, I logged into our shared credit card portal. Sure enough, there was a charge to a local boutique, a place known for custom necklaces and minimalist rings. $418. I copied it to Sundown and ran a backup to the encrypted drive I stored in a safe deposit box under my maiden name. I'd opened that box months ago, long before I had proof of anything, just on a hunch that I'd need it. Now it was almost full. I had allies, too, carefully chosen, softly recruited, never suspicious. Marla from book club had given me 3 notarized statements confirming account withdrawals Drew had made without notification. Dina, my lawyer, had started building the scaffolding of our case. And Annie, a friend from years back whom Drew had once called toxic, had quietly connected me to a forensic accountant who specialized in domestic manipulation cases. Each woman was discreet, precise, and clear about the stakes. They didn't ask what I was planning. They just handed me tools. And Drew kept talking. Always talking. He started making louder jokes in front of others. One night, while his brother and his brother's wife were over for dinner, he laughed and said, "Kayla's taken to housewife life a little too well." I asked her what her 5-year plan was and she said, "Get the grout cleaned." They all laughed. I excused myself to the bathroom, sat on the closed toilet, and stared at the wall until the sound of their amusement dulled into static. Then I took a breath, stood up, and flushed the toilet just so they'd hear something. But the worst moment came not from Drew, but from someone who meant well. At the grocery store one morning, I bumped into Alice, a woman I used to work with before Drew suggested I scale back and focus on the home. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Kayla. Wow. I didn't think you still lived around here." I smiled and said I did. She hesitated, then added, "I ran into Drew a few weeks ago. He mentioned you were taking some time off. Said you'd had a little breakdown last year?" She meant it kindly, like someone gently bringing up a tough topic. But I felt my stomach drop. Drew had been rewriting my story while I was still in it. "Yeah," I said finally, steadying my voice. "It was a breakdown, all right. But the kind that helps you rebuild." I walked away without picking up the item I'd come in for. That night, I took my time. I went through emails, backtracked every phone plan invoice, cross-referenced trips and meetings. I built a complete map of his life, where he was, who he was with, what card he used, how he explained it. I found one receipt that broke the pattern, a lunch date with Ava on a Saturday when he told me he was helping his brother move. I smiled as I uploaded it to Sundown. 1 lie per folder. 1 folder per lie. The next evening, I left a printed design proposal on the kitchen table, not accidentally, but with intent. It was for a local catering company I'd picked up freelance work for. When Drew walked in and spotted it, he picked it up, frowning. "You're doing this for money?" I looked up from the stove. "For fun. And the money's nice too." He narrowed his eyes just enough for me to register it. "I thought we agreed you weren't taking on projects anymore." I shrugged. "I didn't know we'd signed a contract on that." He studied me for a long second. Then he smiled. But it didn't reach his eyes. "Just don't get carried away." "I won't," I said, calmly plating dinner. The following week, I found something I wasn't supposed to see. His phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while he was showering, and without even thinking, I glanced at the screen. It was a preview of a photo, not explicit, but personal. A woman in a sleek black dress, blowing a kiss at the camera. Caption: "Friday can't come fast enough." I locked the screen immediately and set the phone back down. I didn't copy it. I didn't need to. The moment burned itself into my memory, and that was enough. Later that night, as we brushed our teeth side by side, Drew glanced at me in the mirror and said, "You've been quiet lately." "I've been thinking," I replied. "About what?" I smiled, rinsed my mouth, and looked him in the eye. "About Friday." He didn't ask what I meant. The next morning, he came into the kitchen with a cup of coffee, humming. "By the way," he said casually, "I don't worry about you anymore. You're predictable now." I paused, then stirred my oatmeal. "Predictability makes people feel safe." "Exactly," he said, sipping. "It's good. You're stable. You're easy again." He leaned over and kissed my cheek. "It's nice not having to keep track of your moods. You're irrelevant now, in the best way." He said it like a compliment. He truly believed he'd won. And that's when he made the mistake. He left his phone on the counter, unlocked. I didn't touch it. I didn't have to. I simply waited until he walked out of the room, then called out, "Don't forget your phone." He came back, eyes flicking to the screen, and for the first time, I saw real fear flash across his face. Just a second, but it was there. I smiled. And not the polite kind. The kind that says, "It's almost time." He was glowing under the chandelier, standing tall in that over-ironed suit he always thought made him look more important than he was, his glass raised in the air like a man who believed the room existed only to reflect his shine. "To new beginnings," Drew said, beaming as if nothing behind him could ever catch up. Everyone clapped. His boss gave a firm handshake. A few junior associates lingered too long at his side. And Ava, dressed to impress and just smug enough to believe she was untouchable, kissed his cheek like she'd already replaced me. I stood near the back with a glass of sparkling water, watching the man who once told me I'd never leave him take a victory lap around a party he didn't realize was his last one standing. I hadn't planned to say anything to him that night. My original idea had been to let the papers speak for themselves, let the silence do the heavy lifting, let him spiral in private while I moved on without giving him the satisfaction of closure. But something about seeing him there, so loud, so smug, so certain, made me change my mind. Maybe it was the way he laughed a little too hard when Ava whispered in his ear. Maybe it was how confidently he tossed his jacket on the back of the chair I'd once picked out. Or maybe it was just that I wanted him to see my eyes when the ground gave way. So I waited until the speeches were over and most of the crowd had wandered toward the dessert bar, and then I walked up to him with calm steps and a folded linen napkin in my hand. I handed it to him like it meant nothing and said, "You've got something on your collar." He brushed it off quickly, barely looking at me. "Thanks," he said. "Didn't expect to see you tonight." "I figured I should be here for this," I replied, keeping my voice soft, almost bored. He smirked, still watching the room more than me. "You've been so agreeable lately. I was starting to think you finally got it. Settling into your role." I raised an eyebrow. "Which role is that?" He turned to face me then, really looked at me. "The supportive wife. The background character. You know, predictable." I smiled. Predictable people make great threats. They strike quietly, without warning. His expression twitched, just slightly, not quite enough to show fear but enough to reveal confusion. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, tilting my head so I could look him straight in the eye, "you might want to check your email before Ava opens it for you." That line landed. His smile faltered. Just a flicker, but enough. "Kayla, what the hell did you?" "I know about the transfers, Drew. The joint accounts, the Shell LLC, the boutique charges. The necklace you gave her. The lunch reservations. I know it all. And so does my lawyer. And your company's ethics board." "You're bluffing," he said, voice low now, tight and desperate. "Am I?" I leaned in, close enough for only him to hear. "Then let me give you something personal. October 4th, 11:32 a.m. You withdrew $9,400 from our shared account and transferred it to a consulting expense file linked to an account under your name only. You marked it as business development. But you spent it on a weekend trip to Charleston. With her. You paid for a couple's massage. Ava used your rewards points for the hotel. You didn't even clear the cookies on your browser." He stared at me, frozen. "You used to be careful," I said. "Now you're just lazy." I left him standing there with the napkin still in his hand, and I walked straight out of the room, past the caterer, past the valet, into the car I had waiting around the corner. I didn't check behind me. I didn't need to. That was the moment he knew it was real. The next morning, the first call came at 7:09 a.m. I watched it ring and didn't answer. The second came 5 minutes later. The text started at 7:30, "We need to talk." What is this? Is this about Charleston? Why are you doing this? Then, finally, at 9:02, I just got served. After that, silence. That's when I knew he'd opened the envelope. He had received the full packet: separation notice, financial disclosures, detailed transaction records, a digital audit of our household spending going back 2 years, and a formal complaint for marital asset misappropriation prepared by Dina and verified by the accountant Annie connected me to. The final sheet included a direct copy of our prenup, the one Drew insisted we sign before the wedding, not to protect himself, but to make sure I wouldn't run off with anything important. What he never considered was that I'd read it carefully. That I'd learn how to document coercion. That I'd keep receipts. That I'd outstrategize him in silence. He tried calling again at noon. I answered. "Kayla," he said, his voice dry and cracked. "You don't have to do this. We can fix this. We just need to talk like adults." I stayed quiet for a second, then said, "We are. Why didn't you say anything earlier? You should have told me." "I did. Over and over. You just stopped listening." "This could ruin me," he said, and that's when it clicked, not sorrow, not regret, but fear. "It could," I agreed. "Or you could finally start living with the consequences you've handed out to other people. You're going to take everything from me." "No," I said, calm and measured. "I'm going to take back what was mine. The rest? That's just gravity doing its job." I hung up before he could respond. That afternoon, he showed up at my apartment building. I watched from the second-floor landing, hidden behind the curtain, as he paced in front of the call box. He didn't buzz. He just stood there with his hands in his pockets, eyes darting between the door and his phone, like he wasn't sure if he'd hallucinated the entire past 24 hours. I didn't go down. After 10 minutes, he left. Over the next 2 weeks, things unraveled fast. His company suspended him with pay pending investigation. Ava's name was scrubbed from their website. I didn't ask for any of that. I didn't call anyone or leak anything. I just filed the paperwork and let the dots connect themselves. But people talk. HR departments talk louder. The whisper spread like oil. I still remember the day Marla texted me a screenshot of a Facebook post from Drew's aunt, a cryptic line about falling from your own ladder. The comment section was chaos. I muted the conversation, made tea, and sat on the floor with Barney while the world rearranged itself around me. And through it all, I stayed calm. I signed documents. Closed accounts. Met with Dina. Finalized the business registration I'd been working on quietly for months. I called it Fourth Light Designs, a nod to the fourth sunrise I'd watched after deciding I would no longer live on someone else's terms. My first 3 clients came from referrals, all word of mouth. One of them was a woman who had left her own controlling husband 3 years earlier. We didn't talk about it. We didn't have to. On the day our separation was officially filed with the county, I drove out to a little coffee shop on the east side, one with a corner table that caught the morning light just right. I brought my laptop, a worn notebook, and a pen Drew once told me was too nice for grocery lists. I opened my planner, looked at the empty pages ahead, and for the first time in years, didn't feel like I had to explain where I was going. That night, he tried one last time. A long email. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't angry. It was hollow. He said he didn't realize how far things had gone. That he didn't mean to hurt me. That he just got carried away with everything. And at the end, he wrote, "I never thought you'd leave." I guess I was wrong. I didn't reply. Because he still didn't get it. I never left him. I outgrew him. I didn't escape. I strategized. And when I finally walked away, I didn't slam the door. I took the hinges with me. They thought I was the footnote. Turns out, I was the author all along.